David, thank you so much for being with me today for our Speaking Truth to Youth project. And I just have a few questions I want to ask you. The first one is, what in your youth led you to become an activist?
The first thing that happened that kind of got me thinking that things are not as they should be was the 3 Mile Island nuclear meltdown in Pennsylvania when I was, I think, 10. And then I had the good luck to sort of get plugged into the anti-nuclear movement in Massachusetts because of going to a camp in Western Massachusetts run by a Unitarian minister named Doug Wilson and Row Camp. And that's what got me started. Started with the anti-nuke thing, and then it quickly spread. As you know, you find out one thing that's wrong, and then you start realizing that it's all connected with all kinds of other problems.
So, as a young person, a 10-year-old, did you feel guided at all by family or community or school?
The main thing for me, as far as feeling guided, was the Row Camp and Conference Center and the anti-nuclear movement that I sort of discovered and plugged into a little. Otherwise, school and my home environment in Wilton, Connecticut, was profoundly alienating. I didn't know anybody else around there who was against nuclear power. I was the only one I knew. And my family was involved with that because that's how I discovered Row Camp was through my mother. So it certainly was, also family related. I grew up in a wealthy suburb of New York City, and I think it's not at all representative of how it is for so many other people in the country. But I think also the public school atmosphere in the U.S. tends not to be encouraging of political dissent. I mean, it's certainly not my experience with it, but I haven't visited all that many public schools other than the one I went to. I have done some performing in high schools, maybe about 20 times in my entire career. And every time I have performed in a school, that whoever brought me there has gotten in trouble. I think in the United States, that is, not in other countries, but in the United States, without exception, even people that did not think they were going to get in trouble. But then, I end up singing about something that offends somebody, and then, they get in trouble.
What continues to guide you or give you courage and motivate you all these years?
For one thing, there's no future without hope. So hope is a necessary prerequisite for anything else happening. So, as a performer, as a musician, I have always thought of myself as sort of a cheerleader for the movement, whatever movement that might be happening. And as, in that position, I try to, apply my musical skills to keep the movement going and keep people feeling a sense of community and feeling inspired, trying to do that thing that music can do so well in a movement that involves music. So what always gives me any kind of motivation is the fact that anybody is having music at their protests and asking me to sing at them. And lately, I find my motivation outside of the United States, where I'm speaking to you from now.
Why do you think people outside of the United States are more likely to include music in their protests or their activism?
I was just in Mexico last month talking with a former guerrilla fighter for the FMLN from El Salvador, and I was telling him, we don't have music at our protests in the US anymore. And he was shocked. And he said, how can that be? Music is the beating heart of the resistance. I think it's a really important question for people to try to figure out. All I know for sure is that the history of social movements all over the world has always involved music. In the US, which is home to so much music that has become so popular all over the world, so many different styles of music, from hip hop to jazz to bluegrass to you name it, so much rock and roll, so much stuff that has just taken the world by storm. For us not to have music at our rallies it's a shocking development of the past 10, 12 years. And I try to get my head around why it's happened, but it's what's very clear. It's very bad, and people need to get their hearts back connected to their heads and realize that you can't have a social movement that sustains itself and that grows, that has any sense of community around it, if music isn't central to it. That's just how humans are. I mean, one thing that I think we can't necessarily understate is we don't know what the FBI has been up to for the past 50 years or so. We do know what they were doing from the time they came into existence up until 1971. During that period, from 1908 to 1971, we have a very good public record of what the FBI has been doing. And during that time, their main reason for existing was to uh, distract, demoralize, and spread disinformation within the left. That was their job from 1908 until 1971. First, they undermined and ultimately destroyed the industrial workers of the world. Then they moved on to the Communist Party in the 1930s. Then they moved on to the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power Movement, the anti-war movement, and SDS and American Indian movement. And they did their best to undermine and destroy all those organizations. And that's all a matter of the public record because the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI raided the FBI offices in Media, Pennsylvania in 1971 and liberated 1,000 secret documents that told the world about the counterintelligence program that they had been involved with. And one of their main activities was making sure that the cultural wing and the political wing of this amorphous phenomenon that was the 60s Renaissance, making sure that these elements of the movement did not connect, or that when they did connect, making sure that they got disconnected because they saw how powerful the confluence of these things were, how millions of people, their hearts and minds were demilitarized by this phenomenon of all these free festivals that actually make love, not war, was working on millions and millions of people. They did make love, not war. They dropped out of the military. They refused to obey commands. They wouldn't obey draft orders. They left the United States. They went to other countries. It all worked. Yeah, the war kept going, but this movement was tremendously impactful. As far as keeping music out of the movement, they've done a great job of convincing us that we don't want music. And how we've become convinced of that is a multifaceted, full spectrum kind of process. Like there's so many different points at which you might think, oh, we should have music in this event. And then there's so many different reasons why you might decide, oh, maybe we shouldn't. If the decision is let's not have music at the event, you are asking the wrong question. If you're choosing between one performer or another, that's good. That you should do that as an organizer. But if your choice is let's not have music at this event for some reason, that wasn't a good decision. There's a lot of others, fear of people not being on message, fear of not having a musician that is writing about the issue that you're holding a protest about, or you can't find musicians who want to play for free that will only play for 10 minutes. They want longer, or you can't find enough musicians who are not white to fulfill your desires for diversity. So work on diversifying the program later, but don't reject the white musicians because they're white. I mean, this is identity politics gone wild. I blame social media a lot in terms of inculcating people with all kinds of false consciousness around identity politics. So many people are so chronically online, not just young people, but all kinds of people.
What advice do you have for young people, not just about social media, but in general?
For everyone, my advice is really that we need to gather in physical spaces and turn off the screens, turn off social media. If you use social media, use it as a bullhorn. Announce what's going on. Put something out that you might, that's good that you hope might spread. Don't engage in debates in comment threads on any of those platforms. Half the people you're talking to are bots. I hope that most young people, especially, are now by now aware that half of the people you're talking to on those platforms are not actually people. Close all that up and go outside and be part of a society, your town, in physical location. Promote events with posters, physical media, put up stickers, talk to people, make phone calls. I'm not rejecting technology by any means. I'm talking about these massive corporations that are controlling our means of communications. I'm rejecting them, these billionaires, not artificial intelligence or any of these other cool things. That we could parse these things out. Technology isn't a bad thing per se. You can't organize a revolution on Instagram. It's not going to work. They're going to make sure it doesn't work. We have other means of communication, and we need to get back to those. But that's a message for everybody, specifically for the youth. For far longer than I've been alive, and for longer than any youth has been alive, there has been a corporate cult of youth that has been pushing itself on our consciousness. It predates the 60s, but it was big in the 60s, and it's been big ever since then. They're trying to tell us that people who are older are ignorant and they have no wisdom to pass on, and they're just a bunch of whatever, and that the youth are brilliant and the youth are going to lead the future and the youth have all the answers, and they're lying. None of it's true. Young people don't know so much because they're young. You have to live and see the world to learn stuff. Don't let anybody tell you that you're brilliant and you have all the answers when you're 20. You don't. They don't want you to listen to older people who actually know something. And the rest of the world understands that. It's in the United States that we've been fed this cult of youth thing and we've swallowed it. And so they also have it in England and other places, but it's a particular problem in the United States. You leave the US and you see people admire older people. They're interested in their experiences with the resistance, with revolutions, with civil wars, with social movements, all of the sorts of things that people who have lived long enough might have lived long enough to experience in the United States and all over the world. Older people are the people who have actually been around long enough to have figured some things out. That's why they don't want you listening to them. Don't listen to the corporations that tell you that. I mean, young energy is so vital. So, I mean, it's so important. That's like, if a movement doesn't have massive numbers of people under 30 in it, then it's doomed. I mean, of course, the youth are absolutely incredibly important to any movement, and also there's no hope in a movement that doesn't have youth. I mean, that's just how it is. It's a young people are inherently. I hope this doesn't sound condescending to any young people out there, but having been young myself and being older now, I can tell you that there's a certain kind of optimism that I only find in people who are like under 40. Once they get over 40, there's a cynicism that tends to set in, and that's not helpful for sustaining a movement. Now, we need people who believe in themselves or believe that another world is possible, and hopefully we need a lot of older people who believe that another world is possible. But if we don't have young people believing that, then we're doomed.
Thanks so much. Bye, David.
Thank you.